Antenna's co-founder and CEO Jonathan Carson shares new data detailing the leading role SVOD ad plans play in the market. He also debunks myths about ad plan viewers. Listen on.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and that was Colin Dixon at the beginning there from Endscreen Media. Hi, Colin. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this session, Will. We are going to devote our entire session to a discussion with Antenna because they've just released their quarterly report, and there's a ton of great data in there. So I think we should probably just get right to it.
And we're pleased to welcome back Jonathan Carson, who is the CEO and co-founder of Antenna. Welcome, Jonathan.
It's great to be here, Will. Thanks so much.
Hey, Jonathan. Ads and ads. That's a great title for the report.
We try to be clever when we can, Colin.
Okay.
We try as well, but it's very often unsuccessful. But there we go.
Well, we're really delighted to have you back, Jonathan. This has become a quarterly ritual for us, and it's always a pleasure to have you answer some additional questions about the report's data and some of the significance of the findings. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. As Colin mentioned, this report was all about ads, the ad tiers that have been launched by streaming services. And a key conclusion of Antennas in this report is that for the period from Q1 23 to Q1 25, 71% of premium SVOD net subscriber additions were ad supported, were in the ad tiers. So 51.4 million out of the total 71.8 million net ads during this period were ad tiers. So what do you believe the primary appeals are of ad supported tiers? Is it just lower price or something more? And maybe a follow-on to that is, what does that say about consumers' tolerance of ads?
Yeah, it is an amazing stat when you take a step back and think about where we were just a couple of years ago with advertising and streaming. If we had been on this podcast, 3 years ago, talking about ads and streaming, the big question would have been, is there going to be an advertising industry anymore? Are consumers just going to opt out of advertising altogether? Because back then, Netflix had really set a tone that streaming was primarily an ad-free place. Now, Hulu had set kind of an opposite tone that this can work like regular television, but it was a big debate. And importantly, consumers had never really been faced with choice before in advertising, except in very specific edge cases. A service or even a whole medium was either ad-free or is ad-supported, and that's what it was. And so the big grand experiment here has essentially been what would consumers do when faced with that choice. And I think the headline number that you called out, the fact that over 70% of net ads in the past 2+ years have come from ad plans. Essentially, most of the growth in the industry is now comes via ad-supported plans. Tells us the answer of that big experiment. The answer is consumers with the right value proposition will, by and large, choose ads.
And just following up on that, Jonathan, do you think when you say the right value proposition, do you think it's primarily the lower price of the ad tiers that's driving this huge growth?
Let's be clear. I think consumers have different consumers have different levels of tolerance for advertising, but and to some degree, I don't know about you all, but when I'm watching a sports event on YouTube TV and I get the advertising blackout screen, it's kind of annoying. But consumers are not choosing ads because they love ads. Let's face facts. They're motivated by the price. But the answer is the price to value equation is pretty good. Like, they're actually highly motivated at the right price differential. And as long as the ad experience is reasonable, I think as well, this is all helped by the fact that streamers do have lower ad loads than consumers are used to on linear television. But with the right proposition, consumers will make that, they'll make that value trade.
Yeah, it really seems like as they experience the AVODs inside of the SVODs, that the experience is really good, and they stick with it, right? I mean, one of the surprising things, there were several surprising facts I thought in the report, and one of them was that I was looking at the volatility, and it seems almost like the volatility of the ad plans is lower than the volatility of the ad-free plans.
Yeah, I think a good way to look at it is looking at survival rates. So for a group of individuals who sign up for a service or sign up for a particular plan, how many of them are still signed up 6 months later, 12 months later, et cetera. And I think the one of the hypotheses when ad plans started to catch on was, well, okay, that's great. Maybe consumers will, in some cases, opt into advertising, but we're probably going to get lower value consumers that are less connected to the service. And so they're going to have these huge churn rates. And what we find when we actually look at the data is that's not true at all. The retention rates, that survival rate, how many of them are still subscribed 6 months later, 12 months later, almost identical for ad-free subscribers versus ad plan subscribers. And you may be getting a more casual subscriber who is not as tied to the service, maybe doesn't spend quite as much time with the service, and so they're willing to take ads for the lower price. But the corollary is they're paying a lower price, so they're less sensitive about that subscription. If you're paying $7 a month versus $15 a month, it's not as big of a deal. It's not as big of a hit on your budget, and so maybe you're less likely to cancel if you're watching shows the next month on a different service.
Jonathan, here's another, what seemed like another remarkable data point from the report, which is, and I want to make sure I understand this right, but the statement is from the report, of consumers who have been offered an ad plan 2 or more times, 86% choose the ad plan. Did I read that right? And what's your interpretation of that?
Yeah, so this gets down to that idea of how consumers make their choices, and to try to capture that consumer experience, we basically came up with the segmentation approach. So we created 4 different categories of ad choice: people who, when presented with an ad plan, always choose the ad plan; people who never choose the ad plan; people who mix and match, sometimes take ads, sometimes don't. We call those ad managers. And then ad oblivious, the 4th category, is people that just have never signed up for a service where an ad plan was offered. And what we found was a really interesting way to look at it, was looking at people that have had multiple ad choices. So throw out all the ad oblivious and throw out the people that have only been faced with one choice. We saw those ad managers, those mix and match people, were really active. So we said, let's look, to be a mix and match, you have to have multiple ad choices. So let's look at those people that have had 2 or more. And when we isolate the market into that, we find 86% at least one time they've picked the ad plan. So it's only 14% of the market, a tiny piece of the market, always say ad free. So that to me is the killer. That's really the killer insight here. Over time, this is what shows us what the future looks like. Over time, the mainstream consumer activity is, every once in a while, for a service that I'm really deeply committed to, maybe I'll spend up and get the ad free. But usually I'm going to be open to the ad proposition to save money.
Yeah, that is a really surprising fact. I don't know. I guess I'm in that 14% who are ad avoiders, but it just, I think it speaks to the fact that as people have really experienced the ad plans, that they've found the ad experience and ad loads to be much more acceptable than traditional TV, right?
Yeah, and definitely sports streaming is, sports and streaming is a big factor that drives a lot of activity. And in general, when you're watching sports on streaming, you're going to get the ads, even if you're on the ad-free plan. So that I think that factors into it. Let's see what happens. Most in the industry believe ad loads are going to creep up over time. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think these stats, along with the rise in fast activity, where the ad loads are much more aggressive and more like linear television ad loads, it indicates that this proposition's okay. Consumers
Yeah,
are okay with the
yeah.
quid pro quo of getting great content, but having it partially funded by advertising.
So one of the things I noticed with Netflix, listening to the execs there, they claim that there's very little difference between the ad-supported and ad-free viewers in terms of churn and engagement and other metrics. Does your data support that generally for the market?
It definitely does. Yeah. So the from a loyalty standpoint, as we talked about, almost identical. The other big surprise in the data is who these people are that are choosing the ad plans. So there was a second hypothesis, I think, as advertising started to catch on, that number one, they're going to be the less loyal consumers, but number two, they're going to be maybe a younger, less affluent audience. And by the way, that could make them less appealing as an advertising target. That is also totally debunked now that we actually see the data. So when we line up the age and the household income demographics of the people that are on the ad plans versus the people that are on ad free plans. And by the way, of our four ad segments, ad choice segments as well, the demographics, both age and household income, almost identical. And this one seems shocking. If you have more money, wouldn't you be uh, more likely to be willing to spend that money on freeing up your time from advertising? Proves to not be the case. This is not a demographic driven decision. Um, the decision is a different set of criteria. It's a different set of criteria, and people of all different ages and all different income levels are signing on for this quid pro quo of cheaper price and in exchange for giving up a little bit of their time to advertising.
That was actually my next question, Jonathan. I was really surprised by that data in the report because, as you say, the kind of the long-standing theory is that higher income people will essentially buy out of the ads because their time matters so much to them, and they have the luxury of being able to do so and the luxury of being able to have the best experiences possible. And yet your report found that there, as you just said, there really is no difference in income and age between those who subscribe to ad tiers and those who don't. Any other thoughts you have about like this topic? I mean, it's fascinating. It's so counterintuitive and so counter to the narratives that we've been hearing about for so long.
I think it does speak to the way that those ad managers are thinking about their decisions. That the great thing for the industry about the way these ad plans are working out is consumers are really using them not to lower their overall entertainment budget. They're using them to be able to afford more services. And so I think it's not a coincidence at all that this flourishing of the ad plans started to happen right around the time the streaming wars were really kicking in, where you had a bunch of new services being launched, starting with Disney in 2019, but then Peacock and Apple TV Plus, and the rebranded Max and the rebranded Paramount Plus, and all these new a whole bunch of great specialty services were all coming into market, and consumers wanted to try more and more. But consumers, even affluent consumers, don't have limitless entertainment budgets. And so the way that they've been affording a mix of these different services is switching into the ad plans. in order to make their entertainment budget go further. The other thing to remember is we have also been in a pretty intense few years of price increases across the streaming services, and so that is also the less expensive ad plans being introduced is also a way that consumers have been able to absorb those price increases without breaking their entertainment budgets.
So one of the things you did here in the report is you sort of broke consumers out into 4 segments. Could you tell us about those segments and tell us a little bit about them, how their composition has changed maybe over time?
Yeah, so this is our ad choice segments. And so we've got our ad takers, who are people that, when presented with an ad plan, always choose the ads. Our ad avoiders always avoid the ads. They always choose the ad-free plan. Our ad managers.
That's me.
That's you, Colin. Madison Avenue hates you, but that's okay. Our ad managers mix and match. So sometimes ads, sometimes not. And then our ad oblivious have not yet signed up for a service where ad plans was offered. The ad oblivious, the change has been pretty dramatic over the last couple of years. Ad oblivious, going back 2 years ago, was 25% of the market. Going back about 4 or 5 years ago, it was over half of the market had never signed up for a service where an ad plan was offered. And that number is quickly approaching 0. So now, over the past few years, more and more consumers are presented with that choice. The big rise, as ad oblivious drops, the big rise is the ad managers. And we see that over time really becoming the mainstream behavior. A small portion of the market will avoid ads at any cost. A small portion of the market will say, I don't care, I'll always take ads, show as many as you want. Most people are going to start to come up with strategies where I'm willing to have ads here, where maybe I don't use the service as much, or I watch a lot of sports on the service that's going to carry ads anyway. But, this particular service is my, that's where I watch my hit films, or, my really intense drama series, high-end drama series. And in those environments, I don't want to see ads. They'll come up with calculus, some sort of personal calculus to make those decisions. But it'll result in a mix and match scenario.
Seems like it's getting a lot more complicated to be a streaming subscriber these days. Many, many more choices and questions and things to muddle through. And I guess another data point that popped for me is related to the ad tiers is, if I understood it correctly, new users to a service are 65% of ad tier subscribers. So it seems like, let me pause there for a second. I have a follow-up question, but is that a correct interpretation?
Yeah. So we looked at the way that people come into ad plans, and we found a really interesting dynamic where Netflix is building up a substantial portion of its ad base from its existing subs. And now, Netflix is already deeply penetrated into American households, and they have a lot of long-standing customers, so they have less of an opportunity to bring new customers onto their ad plan. But they have been the one service that's been really successful at taking existing subs and moving them onto the ad plan. So about 40% of the Netflix ad plan subscribers are people that were on ad-free that switched to the ad plans. The rest of the industry, not the case. So for the rest of the industry, only 6% of their existing ad plan subs were on the ad-free plan and switched over to service with ads.
So the follow-up question to that, Jonathan, is that it seems like a key conclusion from the data is that had SVOD service, premium SVOD services, not launched ad tiers, this would be a very different and much smaller industry than what we see today. So, putting it another way, ad tiers have dramatically grown the streaming market over the last couple of years. Is that a fair point?
I think it is. And the way I think about it is from a services perspective. There is a certain addressable market that they have at their ad-free price. So if we take a service, let's say it's going to have a $17 ad-free price and a $9 ad tier. There's a certain portion of the market that are going to be willing to pay the $17 for that service. But there's another portion of the market that is not willing to pay 17, but they are willing to pay 9 for that service. And by introducing the ad tier, they're expanding their total addressable audience to those more casually interested prospects that won't pay the full freight.
Yeah. That's what they always say, right? If you've sold your product under existing terms to everybody that's possibly want it, then change the terms and you'll get a new group of customers. And that definitely seems to be the case in the market today, right? A lot of people were sitting on their hands and not trying services because they were too expensive. But with the advent of the ad tier, they feel that that's a more acceptable price to try, right?
Yeah, and I think we see it in other industries, right? You've got Banana Republic, and then you've got Banana Republic Factory. You've got Nordstrom, and then you've got Nordstrom Rack. You've got the $90,000 Mercedes, and then you've got the entry level $45,000 Mercedes line. So it's not a new concept.
No.
From a consumer behavior standpoint or from a brand standpoint. It is pretty interesting to see how the entertainment industry figured out how to apply that, because outside of matinee pricing at the movie theater, we don't have tons of examples where the entertainment industry has historically done really successfly executed a differential pricing strategy. But this is a case where it's resulted in just as you said, Will, a whole cycle of growth that they would not have otherwise been able to obtain.
Yeah, and picking up on that cycle of growth, Jonathan, and maybe jumping off from the report just a little bit, do you see anything else on the horizon at this point that could similarly power SVOD subscriber growth now that this huge new addressable market, that we were just talking about, has been addressed? I guess one question is, do you see more growth coming from that? And then secondarily, what I just asked, is there something else on the horizon that could potentially expand the market even further?
From an advertising perspective, I would look to specialty services. We did highlight in the report that 2 specialty services that have launched ad tiers, AMC Plus and BET Plus, a little slower uptake than we've seen with premium SVOD. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how the specialty players utilize this differential pricing strategy as well to potentially grow their addressable markets. From a non-advertising perspective, the other big angle at play, which is maybe a couple years behind the advertising curve, but potentially just as big of a growth driver, is bundling. And I think bundling is a similar concept. Can we come up with creative pricing and packaging that's going to make my service appeal to a broader set of people that are a little bit interested but not completely committed to my offering? And so in the right scenario, bundles can have that same type of effect.
So final question, Jonathan. We've got one holdout in the premiums, and that's Apple TV Plus. This data, can they ignore this data? It sounds to me like if they want to grow more, and they certainly do because they're doing other things to try and grow, like, for example, appearing in the Amazon Channels aggregator store. Can they resist? Will they join the ad plan providers?
No, so not going to make any predictions here, but I will say, Apple is, I think we all know Apple's playing a little bit of a different game in the video space. Video is a kind of a complementary piece of an overall device and ecosystem strategy, as opposed to, a pure standalone business like it is for, say a Disney or a Netflix. And so Apple doesn't have to play by the same rules, and they don't have to play the same mass market game that a Netflix or a Disney does. That being said, Apple as an organization, they have historically been open to playing in advertising where I think the thing you always hear them say is, we do it when it benefits our stakeholder groups that we really care about. And so if you look at the way they've used ads in the mobile ecosystem, they've used advertising very strategically as a way to help app developers make money within the Apple ecosystem. So I think that, is probably more the calculus. How does it benefit the Apple user? How does it benefit, people that make shows on Apple? That's maybe where I would look for their motivators. And depending on how they, read those motivators, this data is certainly going to tell them that consumers are open to the proposition under the right circumstances. But they'll make the decision, I think, based on how it helps the Apple ecosystem.
Yep.
And one last final question, Jonathan, which is, for listeners, how can they learn more about this report and possibly download it?
Well, thank you for that, Q, Will. So the report is available for download at antenna.live. That's www.antenna.live.
And we will, of course, include a link when we post this podcast.
So this was great, Jonathan. As always, we appreciate you coming on to the podcast once each quarter to give us some more color on your report. So again, congrats on the report. Remarkable stuff. Really interesting. We appreciate your time today.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jonathan. We always learn something great when you come on. Thanks. Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News, all rights reserved.